Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interviewed Dr. Lynda Ulrich. She's a founder of Goodness Exchange. She's a host of Goodness Podcast, and she's also author of a book, Happiness is an Option. Her organization celebrates the wave of goodness and progress around the world. And most business leaders, as we're passing a pandemic, will agree that they are dealing with the information overload at a workplace. Lynda and I had a discussion on impact of a negative information overload at workplace and its impact on our staff's health, culture, and productivity. She also shared insights on building a gratitude economy, and she also provided a process of building BCorps and its impact on our customers, staff, and leaders as well. So if you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe and send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Dr. Lynda. Dr. Lynda is a founder of Goodness Exchange, and she's also an author of Happiness is an Option. Dr. Lynda, thank you so much for time, and welcome to podcast.
I'm delighted to be here.
I'm looking forward to our discussion because, what we've gone through for the last couple of years, what you're working on, I think is very important. And especially with the gratitude economy, I think, where everybody's trying to get out of what we had for the last couple of years. So I'm looking forward to learning from you and looking forward to our discussion.
I love talking about the gratitude economy and putting what we've been doing in the rearview mirror.
Okay, so why don't we start? Walk us through what is Exchange, a Goodness Exchange, and how did all that started, and what do you guys do?
Well, I'm part of the I'd say the earliest part of the Great Resignation and the Great Questioning. Back in 2000, all my professional life, I've been a dentist. My husband and I are both dentists in Vermont for 30 years. And back in 2010, 11, 12, I started to see that my patients were having this really bad sense of future fatalism. Mm-hmm. The news was overwhelmingly negative, and then social media was putting so much pressure on our psyche. And I kept saying, oh my goodness, somebody's got to do something about this. Somebody's got to do something about this. And where the Great Questioning or the Great Resignation fits in with me is that I just said one day I had this incident with a patient where I knew somebody had to do something about it, and it was going to be me. Mm-hmm. So I looked on the internet for some place that was doing good news, not puppies in mailboxes, but real innovation and real progress going on in the world that no one knew about, with no politics and no ads. Mm-hmm. And out of 4 billion websites, there was no one.
Wow.
And I just had this moment of catharsis where I said, that's it. I'm going to write an article a day on anything under the sun to prove it is still an amazing world and elevate the narrative about our times to expand it to a more balanced view. Mm-hmm.
Your take on the media is so even relevant today. Even today we're in the same state where you were before. Did you have a media background, or how did you get involved in this?
Well, I'm a lifelong artist, a lifelong writer. I'm very well read, and I lived and traveled to many, many, many bleak places all over the world, and always with purpose. Mm-hmm. And I knew, and I drug my kids. I have 3 children, my husband. We took our kids with us everywhere on these purposeful journeys, and we knew that folks would never see the generosity and ingenuity that happens in places that have so little. Mm-hmm. And that's the part of our humanity that I felt like we had to shine a light on. Not only the people that were coming up with these extraordinary innovations, but also the good people who were doing things directly every day to change the future. So the Goodness Exchange is a website where people can find out that there's just no end to the good progress in the world, and also find their way into it, discover their role in it if they want. Mm-hmm. So there's thousands of articles there about goodness and progress. There's my podcast speaking to thought leaders around the world who are doing incredible things. There's a social media group there where we're kind of we don't let people get in there and monkey with the machinery of goodness and progress and celebration. So it's a very tightly controlled group of people that are just having a positive effect on each other.
Mm-hmm. So I
Yeah.
see a lot of good stories on your website. Is it focused on business stories only, or is it on individual stories, or is it what can any focus on any type of stories or any countries, or just a broad scope of just bringing some goodness?
I tell you, that's the way goodness is in the world right now. There are millions of people. Everything from the nonprofit world to something I love to talk about now is the B Corp world and its impact on finding where the gratitude sweet spot really is for business is finding a way to do seriously good business and make the future a better place for everybody at the same time. The largest generation of consumers in history between the millennials and the Gen Zers is going to be able to discover if you're not doing good business and making the world a better place at the same time. They are so digitally savvy. And so the future is going to, those two generations are going to reward people that have found a way to do both. So on the Goodness Exchange, we might celebrate, for instance, a company in Vancouver that looked at the beginning of the pandemic at 5 million chopsticks going in the landfills a month. It's some insane number. And they figured out a business model where they make the most extraordinary home goods out of used chopsticks. That's a business model. They're making good money, and they're making the world a better place at the same time. So we might write an article on a business like that that's done something ingenious. We might write an article about people who have had a huge impact or a huge, completely new idea about the way to tackle some of our biggest problems. For instance, there's an article about a man who's discovered that single mothers make the best game wardens in Africa.
Wow.
For a whole host of reasons that'll blow your socks off. Or we might write an article about an insight, a TED Talk that just shifts. We curate the TED Talks for the very best of the best that help us shift up to a more thoughtful, helpful place in our minds. So all this doom and gloom does not have an impact, not nearly the impact it has had on our decisions.
Yeah, I see so many, innovation that you talk about. There's so many stories from the world that you bring it to. There's somebody doing a good work. A lot of young people as well, right? With the technology, they're innovating a lot of different solutions and solve a lot of different problems, right?
Yeah, it's what we've been really interested in is people who have been able to look at the supply chain of anything from chocolate to luggage to socks, whatever it is, and say, we can do better. There's a chocolate company named 5 North Chocolate. There's a great interview with him. He is the epitome of the way millennials are going to, not all, but many are going to drive us into a new world as far as business and industry having to be responsible players in all of our future. It can't be just about shareholders or the stock price anymore.
We're looking at all the stories and all the articles and the podcasts. What is some couple of stories if you share with the one story that stands out and recently that you published that somebody's doing a good work?
Well, let's start on a small level. Most of us think we can't make a difference. Like if the problem is just too big. And we recently did an article about a woman who had her own health crisis. And then all of her friends and family, God bless them, brought a food, what they call it, a food train. Everybody promised to bring a hot dish every night so her family could get through the 3 months that it would take her to recover. And this is the way innovation works in big ways, is when somebody actually lives through something that they realize there's a need that's not being filled. So she started a nonprofit where they've served like 90,000 meals to locals in the Hartford, Connecticut area who are going through recovery, but they're super healthy meals. And they involve local high schoolers and anybody who wants to volunteer. And they have a model of teaching and collaboration and mentoring that changes people's lives. And they're doing this great thing in their community by providing healthy meals for people who are sick. I mean, it's this doing two things at one time, or three or four, that the best innovators are mastering, and we can learn from them. Let's say you noticed a problem in your own community, and that's something that's really important. We're not just pointing at the guy. For instance, there's a guy in India who lost his son to a pothole accident, and it turns out that about 10,000 people a year in India lose their lives to pothole and automobile accidents because the infrastructure is so hard to keep up with there. And so when his son died, he turned his grief into action, which so many great thought leaders do. I'll talk to you about another one in just a minute. But this guy has literally filled 600 potholes with his own recipe of asphalt and so forth on his own. He just does his daily work, and then where he's casting his grief is in helping others in some quiet corner of India. Somebody's figured out he's saved about 800 lives single-handedly by doing this pothole work. And then there's Mo Gadwa. So Mo was the CBO of Google X, and he has been inspired to lead a movement in the world about realizing that the internet and AI can learn love and happiness. That it is possible to teach AI and through machine learning love and happiness, and we've got about 4 years. He stretches it out to 7 on a day when he's not feeling too pessimistic. But we've written an article about his work to get people to understand that what we do on the internet, that machines are learning from how they see us behave. And his concept is that machine learning and AI is like we're raising a child. And this child will either be a terror in 7 years because we taught it that that's what we want.
Yeah.
Or if we start, being more measured and thoughtful and helpful, it will learn that that's what we want. And we could have a world of technology. He argues that AI is already sentient. And he makes a darn good argument about it. So this is the articles that we write about are soup to nuts. There's Topher White. Topher White has discovered that we can save every inch of the remaining rainforest in the world using old cell phones like we have in a drawer. All of us. He particularly loves the 2010 Motorola.
Okay.
But he was an engineer, a software engineer, and he went to Borneo on a vacation. And he was in this orangutan game reserve one day, or it was a given reserve, and all of a sudden the whole staff ran off into the woods, bolted in a certain direction, and like somebody 27 would do, he just ran right after him with his phone. And so he filmed this thing, and not even 500 feet from the reserve headquarters were a group of people taking down a tree that it would take about 5 people to get around, arm's length.
Okay.
This ancient tree. But what he realized was that the rainforest is so noisy with animal sounds that no one could hear the chainsaws. And he realized that that's the key to conserving the remaining rainforest. Is that we could if we can pick up on the sound of chainsaws quicker, locals would swoop in and rescue their own neighborhood. It doesn't need to be a bunch of folks from far away to solve this problem. So he figured out a way to tune old cell phones to pick up only the frequency of a chainsaw, and then so he places them in the canopy about every 3 kilometers around the perimeter of remaining rainforest. And then the minute somebody fires up a chainsaw, it alerts locals who swoop in and save the day and save the resources for the locals. This is, I could go on and on. We could talk for hours telling you examples of innovation just like that that we should be hearing in the news cycle, but that's not what winds up top of the internet.
Well, definitely they're more on a profit side, right? What sells, right? That's what the news channels about. What they can make money. But definitely there's so much goodness in the world that people like you bring forward to our attention. I mean, without it, how would we find out all the stories you just mentioned?
Yes. And I think it's really important that we've done this since 2014 with absolutely no agenda. We have no ads. And no sponsored posts and all that. You have to be really careful. I've learned a lot about the internet. You asked me what my background was. I was a great writer, a voracious reader, a world traveler, and I guess I was fixing teeth with computers and dentistry in 2003. So that was 1% of dentists in the world, if even that. And so I guess I'm an early adopter of technology too. And the combination there made me kind of fearless about what's possible for one person to do. And that's really one of my overall messages for people is, if you're in the business world, find your way into the gratitude economy. Make sure that what you're doing has meaning for your employees and makes on balance their lives, it's a plus in their lives. And then make sure the products or services that you provide, send people away soaring. It's not that hard.
So let's talk about that. B Corp. What is B Corp? If you walk us through, and it looks like there's a lot of podcast episode on your website. We're talking about B Corp. What is it, and how does that play a role in economy?
Yeah. So many people will have heard of B Corps, but maybe they're not quite ubiquitous throughout our economy. But and so the ordinary person might not know that when you do business with somebody who, and most people will, if what you have to go to get B Corp status is unbelievable. So there's a global standard that's very highly monitored. Oh, you can cheat anything. Yeah, the naysayers, they have a point for almost everything that comes out of my mouth. Yeah. And there's surely so much greenwashing going on, but I believe we human beings are a lot more savvy than even we were 10 years ago. So, but let's talk about B Corps. B Corps have an international standard that they have to meet to even get B Corp status. They have to have a level of transparency that's extraordinary, so that anyone could go in and really see if they're walking their talk. So that whole greenwashing thing, it probably literally can't happen with somebody who's managed to get B Corp status. Yeah. And there's certain standards that you have to meet about how you treat your workforce, and how your supply chains work. I mean, this is the devil. The devil is in the details when it comes to supply chains. And so corporations, if you let's say you want to buy a new pair of tennis shoes, you just had your old ones, time to buy a new pair. You can literally go to the internet, and there's a wonderful B Corp registration website. It's not coming to mind right now, but it'll come to mind. And you can find it yourself in two shapes.
Just Google it, yeah.
Yeah, just Google it. And there you can put in tennis shoes in the search box, and you'll get a list of all the companies that make tennis shoes or luggage or toothpaste or whatever you want. And I think a time's going to come, and it's the awareness. I mean, just now, you and I are talking about it. I did a podcast with an expert from New Zealand on B Corps 3 months ago. I see it. That's one of the things I'm good at, is that I'm good at seeing social trends from the 100,000 foot quite early. Like most of the articles that we write, we have, when somebody blows up and becomes part of the zeitgeist and everybody knows about them, we've already written about them twice, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So that's why I'm getting kind of confident about making pointing to things that are on the horizon for us all that are super good, because we've just seen it over and over again when you curate the internet like we do, and we're so rigorous with our criteria for what makes our radar screen or what we'll point to. That's a whole nother matter, is understanding the fraud on the internet. You can get a version of humanity that is just so exciting. And B Corps, if you want to do business in a real safe way and you want the quickest way from A to Z, like you don't have time to spend an hour researching tennis shoes on the internet, just find that B Corp, the B Corp registry. It's like a library of companies that qualify, and you can put almost any product you want in it. And you could, by now, there's enough B Corps in this world, you could almost find anything you want, and keep your business with people that are making the world a better place and doing good business.
Well, you mentioned that to me last time we talked. I had no idea what B Corp is, and then after that I started doing some research, and I found out that 4 of the major banks in Canada, three of them already B Corp, right? So I found tons of companies that B Corp in Ontario. So I think it's already out there, and companies are already responding to it, and it's already working.
Yeah, it's the way to go. I like to tell this little story. Only because I think we all have an example. After I tell my story, you'll be thinking of your own, I'm sure. So a year into the pandemic, maybe 6 months, my kids I have 3 kids, they were all college age, they all moved home and brought a significant other. So my household went from 2 people to 8.
Okay.
And there we sat together for 18 months. Okay. We're on a farm in Vermont, so out here in the middle of nowhere. And so it was just me and my husband that would leave the house ever. So one day I was going out the door and I had to get a sheet of plywood for something we wanted to do. And I said, I'm going to get a sheet of plywood. Anyone need anything else? And I was going to a big box store. And all of a sudden, from every corner of my house, yelled, where are you going? And I said, to this box store. I'm not going to name names here. And all in unison, everyone yelled, no!
Wow.
And I'm like, what? Wait, what? They said, go to this other box store, because that box store, the CEO is the only one of the few African American people on the Fortune 500, and they absolutely did not want me to go to the one that I was headed to at first, because that CEO has such a horrifying reputation in the public zeitgeist with millennials and Gen Zers about not really caring about the future for us all. So there's an example. The price of a sheet of plywood ended up making no difference whatsoever. It's just that that generation wanted nothing to do with doing business.
Yeah.
With that company, and that's happening all around us. Examples of that. I don't know. If I buy a Christmas present for my kids, I better darn sure check the reputation of the CEO and the corporation. Or it's not going to be welcome in this house. And I don't think my kids are that strange. I notice that all around me. People are rewarding businesses that have found a way to do good business, make money, go ahead. Yeah. As long as they're making the world a better place in the process.
It's value what you stand for, right? And right. You mentioned that millennials are Gen Z. I mean, I hire a lot of young people as well. So new people coming from universities or either graduates, they almost demand that they want to know that what you stand behind as a business before they join you, right? So in a previous generation, we didn't have that so much emphasis on that. They wanted to know that what do we stand behind? How do we contribute to the economy? How do we contribute to the society? But then the younger people coming out of schools, they almost demand that, they want to know that. So that's got to be a mass awakening for businesses that they need to stand on social issues or economical issues one way or another way. They have to take a stand on some of those issues. Before they were not taking stand, it was just a business as usual.
Yeah, it's and plus the whole B Corp model, which is the middle ground between nonprofits and for-profits. And I only say it's the middle. It's totally for-profit, but I only say it's the middle. I don't even know why I say it's the middle. It's sort of a new outgrowth of only having two choices. Now we have three. But what I was going to say to your point about the generations, I recently heard a study of, it was from one of the big California university systems, where they were starting to notice that more and more students were pretty much demanding that they had courses that were related to sustainability. And these are people that were math majors, history majors, English majors. They wanted sustainability to be a part of the curriculum in these majors that you and I wouldn't think are obvious. And when they did a survey, they found that 83% of this huge university population were expecting sustainability to be tied into all these various course choices. And in the end, they did it. They found a way to work sustainability into everything from English lit to psychology. Yeah.
So is there a relationship between that and that great resignation going on, and especially in the US, not much in Canada? I think it's going to come eventually. A lot of people leaving work and they just don't want to go back to work. Is there any connection between those two? It's just happening, and what are your thoughts on that?
So a wonderful thought leader that I interviewed on my podcast made me aware of this this big number, and I don't remember it quite clearly enough to quote it, so I'm not, but it was an enormous number of people in the mass resignation are identifying the fact that they're looking at their current situation and saying, if I do this another 3, 5, God forbid, 10 years, am I going to consider myself having had a life well lived? And they're saying no. In fact, the last statistic I saw on a McKinsey poll was that was horrifying to me. Almost 60%, 59% of people interviewed said they were somewhat likely to consider leaving their jobs in the next year. Wow. That's huge. And
That's big
what
number,
I
yeah.
see when I talk to lots of thought leaders about this who have some connection to this world is that the pandemic gave us time to pause and really, really say, is what I'm doing contributing to a life well lived that I define for myself, not what my parents taught me, told me I was supposed to become or do, and not what my major turned out to be, which was very often set by what the parents or society told you to do. And people are just saying, they're looking around and saying, can I do better? That includes, is my middle manager a crazy person making everybody miserable? That means, does my company appreciate me? Am I getting to use any of my what I'm uniquely built to contribute? Am I going to use any of those skills in this place? So I think there's a lot of questions around the Great Resignation that people are asking themselves, and I don't, because of these other changes in society, I don't think people think they have to run off and join an ashram. I think they know that there's nonprofits and BCorps and people doing the good in the world that they can work for and contribute what they're uniquely built to contribute.
Ah, interesting. But that puts business leaders, on a different angle, right? So what we have to do as a business leaders, first of all, we have to change that. And second of all, one is a resignation. The other part is doing good in the world. There's a lot to be changed in the businesses. I think business leaders have a lot of challenges to get over.
Yeah, I completely, when I do talk about the Great Resignation, I never, ever, ever encourage people to launch out of what they're doing. The first thing I recommend people do is try and find pride in place. Like, it's really easy as an employee, because I've been all my life been on both ends of the stick. It's really easy to blame your current discouragement in your working life on others.
Yeah.
But, we have a lot more control over our surroundings than we think. You say, oh, there's no connection in my community. Well, start it. If you know how to play the guitar, start a Thursday night Facebook Live event where anybody in your department can come and you'll teach them what you know about playing the guitar. Or now that we're coming out of the pandemic, lead a hike somewhere, or go offer that this secret place within a 10-minute drive, and after work cocktails. All those things that build relationships also build capacity on teams. Like, you discover that somebody knows this thing that could be used in some wild way, and somebody else has an expertise that's not even being used in the workplace. This is where we self-organize and we find what we're uniquely built to contribute. And if businesses create an incubator environment where people can self-organize, there's some science about that. About 85% of us will. Imagine that world.
Yeah, definitely it's a challenge, because the business leaders have to manage these people. They definitely have to, you got to find a balance between growing a company and doing a goodness, right? You got to do both same time. So definitely, a lot of business leaders, if you are doing that before, if you have to make a shift towards it, they definitely have to sharpen their skill set. They have to learn new stuff, and they have to go at it. A different skill set than just simply managing people. So they get a personal development journey to go on to build all the skill set to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, walking your talk is, I'd say, like the number one skill set that we leaders need to be able to do every single day. You just can't get away with being seen as somebody who says one thing and does another. There's some great statistics I'll share with you. I think it was a Glassdoor interview I saw. I think 61% of people now identify as values-driven employees. They are looking for work with people who match their values, people in corporations. And another statistic that I found incredible, also from a really tight source, is that 69% of people in 2018 identified as values. This is 2019. 69% of people identified as values-based consumers. That means they were choosing who to buy from based on their values. And that was up 13% in 1 year. So can you imagine how hard people try to move that needle, even 1%, even a fraction of a percent, consumer sentiments? And here we are in the middle of like a shower of gold if you're willing to embrace this new model. And you could be standing there with a pitchfork if you don't.
Yeah, I know that's very important, and your information is very important, because we all surrounded with all the information on the media all the time. That's where a lot of distractions comes in. There's hardly any good news out there, or somebody's doing good, but that's where that having that information is so important. You want to surround yourself with the good information, not with all the negative stuff, right? That impact your mindset. If you don't have a right mindset, how are you going to go innovate and do good in the world?
Yeah, here's what I think most people know deep down what I'm going to say, but I don't think we act like we know it. So the internet, in 1993, there were 300 websites in the world on the internet. And by 2003, there were 30 million. And so what happened there, it wasn't some diabolical scheme. What happened there was the engineers in 1993 were running into work every day so excited about finding new ways. That was the goal of the internet originally, was to connect us all and connect us all to information way more efficiently. But with that growth trajectory, it got out of their hands. They just lost control of being able to decide what rises to the top. And unfortunately, the way it went was the things that got our attention were multiplied. That became the value. If people gave it their attention, then it would rise to the top. Period. There was no accounting for any amount of goodness or progress or value to society. It was all just what we gave our attention to. And of course, it didn't take long for marketers and the media and content creators to figure out that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala that is on 24/7, giving our attention to danger and disorder. Those two things. And that's every one of us. No, Gandhi had the same part of his brain. Mother Teresa. We're all hardwired the same way. But people that we revere as thoughtful, measured voices throughout history manage to control what they give their attention to. And on the internet, as you know, it just came on us like a freight train, and it didn't come with an owner's manual. It didn't, I always think it's a wonder that my kids here in Vermont, it was a law that they had to take keyboarding, but they didn't teach the kids one thing about how to know who to trust on the internet. No critical thinking whatsoever was ever taught to them.
Yeah, they never learn critical thinking, but look at how much messaging on social media we dump on them all the time. They don't even have a way of analyzing some of those messages, right? They just consume everything. And how do you train kids to, or even staff, the business owner have the same issues, right? So distraction is one of the biggest challenges the business owners deal with, and we deal with the parents, we deal with the kids as well. There's so much messaging on our social media. How do you train yourself what you consume, what not to consume, or look at a good information, not all the negative stuff, right? As you mentioned, we all train to respond to negative information or a fear and all that information. So how do you train yourself? How do you approach that all that information on social media?
Okay, so along this journey that I went on from ordinary web user to the last TEDx talk I did, they billed me, we all thought this was a hoot on our team, but they billed me as the global positive media mogul. Because at that time I had like 7 platforms. We've recently consolidated them all into the Goodness Exchange, but I guess I met the qualifications for a global positive media mogul. In any case, what I learned on that journey, and I think it's important that I started out as ordinary as corn, because I was able to see it as a newbie, as a newcomer, as a beginner, and now I'm able to see it for what it really is. I didn't accept any of the rules. I've never paid to play. Maybe the Goodness Exchange could be 1,000 times bigger, but I wasn't willing to do any of the things that it takes in the attention economy of the internet to get there. So here's what I came up with. I came up with the 4 shifts. And you don't have to run to get a pen. If you just put 4 shifts, either spelled out or the number 4, in a Google search, it's going to land you where I've made it into like a 10-minute read. So you can have even a little bit more than I'm going to say now, but it's super easy.
Okay.
This is how I control my what I see on the screens of my life. Like all the things that people tell me are on the internet, I never see them, never. Because I follow these 4 really simple shifts. Okay, the first one is pause before you click on anything, because someone is counting every click you make. And by a click, I mean, a like, a share, a tap, a swipe. Even some algorithms are built to recognize how long your eyes are sitting on a piece of content.
Yeah.
So when I go on the internet, I go with absolute purpose. I will not be distracted. I will not have my time trashed. So if I want to go to Facebook, I still go on social media. I still watch the news, but I go there with purpose, and I'm very disciplined. And so my algorithms send me a whole bunch of different stuff than other people. So pause before you click on anything. And here's my trick. I ask myself one question. Do we need more of this? Okay. So let's say on social media, my political team, which I wouldn't give away, has some giant victory over the other side. And I want to chime in and yay and go crazy. And no. We do not need more fighting on the internet. We do not need more name calling and all that. Okay. So I won't engage content, even if it's something that suits my sensibilities. And I won't do the other either. When there's clickbait, this content that's just meant to make you mad, don't forget, all that matters is that you clicked on that thing. So if you click on the meme content, even if you're going to write the dissertation of your life and give them what for, you just gave them a vote. And that's how stuff rises to the top. And if you chime in about something that just makes your blood boil, you also bring about 15, 20, 2,000 people right in behind you who want to argue at you. So I'm disciplined about pausing before I click on anything. Then I ignore, because I do that, the second shift is ignore more. I just ignore probably 90% of what I used to click on. And that that teaches your algorithms what you want to serve.
What you want to ignore.
And then the third shift, so it's pause, ignore more. Third shift is seek signs of goodness and progress. When you go on the internet, make sure what you type in that search box is a term that you want to see more of. If it's, positive news, innovation, ecosystems, whatever it is, good gratitude economy, goodness exchange, whatever it is, your algorithms are trained to pick up on what you're seeking, and we all know that, and serve you more. And then the fourth is when you see goodness and progress, share it. Because likes mean nothing anymore. And what content creators are doing, they're watching very carefully what we share. So we've got to be very careful before we share something. Even, like I said, if it's for our team and political team and we won and no. If you see the neighbor 10-year-old raised $400 for the local humane society, don't just like it. Move your finger over a little bit and share it. Because what you share is what we will all get more of. So there's the shifts. Pause, ignore more, seek signs of goodness, and when you see it, share it.
Good stuff. I'm going to list those. Those are good 4 pointers. I'm definitely going to list those 4 pointers below the video as well. So let me just recap what you just mentioned. So pause, ignore, and then what was the third one?
Seek signs of goodness
and then the last one was simply share.
Yeah, when you find it, when it shows up on your feed, don't just like it.
Yeah.
We all learned that the neighbor boy could raise $400 for the Humane Society. We might get out there and do a few nice things ourselves that day. Beautiful
stuff. So let's talk about your book. Happiness is an option. So what was if you just share with that, is happiness really what was the intent of what made you write this book, and if you just share the the summary of it, what was the intent for this book?
Yeah, so right before the pandemic struck, I was really I was really starting to focus in on telling the stories that we tell on the website in a book format. Just because I recognized that people needed to know that what they see on the news and the social media was only a slice of reality. So I
Right.
was just going to fill this great book full of one story after another. You could literally just open it anywhere and start reading. Because fascinating stories of perseverance and craziness in these
Mm-hmm.
innovators' lives that they get over. And all those people have found a way to get around setbacks that I think are very useful to all of us in business and stuff. So it was going to be a really nice book, and it still will happen one day. But then when the pandemic struck, I saw that people needed a recipe. Do you remember hearing about a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma?
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I heard about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would recommend everyone watch it. And if you're paying the phone bill or you're handing your kid a cell phone, 100% you must watch it together. Reserve some time to talk about it. My kids are older now, but if I was in that zone where my kids are teenagers, I think it should be mandatory because we're not teaching them in school about the game being played with their emotions.
Okay.
And it's not like a shaming video, and it's not another scary doom and gloom scenario. It just has the people who invented the internet sitting on a bar stool, like literally the guy who invented the infinite scroll on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
or the guy that invented the like button on Facebook, or the woman who invented the swipe. All those people are interviewed sitting on the stool in this warehouse, and they tell the story of how it took place. And none of it worked because item after item was taken to this almost maniacal level of controlling our attention.
Yeah.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
I call what we're getting out of the attention economy. Because, I mean, literally since the first radio broadcast in the 1920s, when we
Mm-hmm.
could actually, really just descend upon people in mass, this is what we've been in, is the attention economy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all about interrupting people over and over again with ads and this and that, and getting in front of people 7 times, so now you're on their thought map and all that stuff. But I think we're wise to it now. Most of us know that there's something up. So the Netflix documentary, I would encourage anybody to watch. It's not more doom and gloom. It'll make you feel empowered. But the thing they didn't do, I kept waiting. I was looking at my watch every minute as it ticked by. It didn't tell us what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what my book does. Okay, so after you find out the game being played with your emotions by your in 100% of your online life, they finished up the documentary with like 20 minutes about government regulation and Saturday morning cartoons.
Ah.
It was so crazy. And so the book um is about the 4 shifts, that's in it, but it's about what we do instead, what we do next once we have the insight. And you know, um what we give our attention to expands.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of how we raise our teenagers. If all we give our attention to their failure or their lack of coming home at curfew or whatever it is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but
Mm.
it expands,
Yeah, no, I
right?
recently watched one doc. To your point about this, social media. I recently watched one interview, and I was talking to my daughter actually about this. You know that when Instagram came out, the feed on Instagram. I don't know if you heard of that. The feed on Instagram it was moving automatically. You open a phone, if you go to feed, it will move automatically. They paused that. Then the psychologist behind it, it made it that you have to move your thumb to move the feed. And the reason they did that, because every time you move your thumb, it creates that dopamine reaction in your brain that hooks you into that keep moving that thumb again and again. So they moved that from auto to moving your thumb. And I was talking to my daughter, the reason they do that because there's a psychologist behind it, and they know your reaction and what triggers in your chemical reaction in your brain, and all the social media clicks and all the stuff is designed accordingly. And that it was interesting that it was auto mode first that feels moving if you just open a phone, but they move that to moving a thumb because it can trigger something in your brain.
You are nailing it. I took 7.5 pages of notes on that Netflix documentary.
Wow.
And most of it was because I'm a stickler for sources. The part of the goodness exchange, one of the biggest things I think is missing in our online lives is the universal gap of the internet is trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took crazy amount of notes about the quality of their sources through the thing and went back and checked them myself, and they were spot on. But that is the message that literally every, with almost minuscule scarcity, almost every piece of content on the internet is created to capture and hold our attention. That's what gets rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say there's Topher White over here who's discovered how to save all the remaining rainforest with all cell phones. There's some guy who's willing to use clickbait and radical, all kinds of radical neuroscience to attract us to some male enhancement potion that's made out of the last rhino's horn.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got two people that both have an idea,
Yeah.
and the rhino horn guy, if he's willing to use neuroscience and follow that whole thing, he's going to win. Topher White's project to save the rainforest is going to die on the vine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just the way it happens. However, I will say this sounds like doom and gloom coming out of the the positive global media woman's mouth, because here's the point I would love your listeners to. This sword cuts both ways. So everything I just told you about the internet being all doom and gloom and built to trigger our attention, the opposite side of that sword is that if we decide what not to give our attention to,
Mm-hmm.
those things will fade to obscurity.
Mm-hmm.
That no one is creating internet content, we won't click on it.
Yeah.
And if about 25%, there's a really cool number I'll share with you in just a second of how I got this number, but about 25% of us knew and realized the game being played with our emotions, and we stopped playing. We did the
Mm-hmm.
4 shifts.
Yeah.
Literally, it only takes 25%. The World Economic Forum did a study with the University of Pennsylvania and the University of London. They found out that it only takes 25% of a population to adopt a new way, and then the rest domino effects because of neuroscience too.
Mm-hmm.
So if just 25% of us started saying, no, will not engage with content that isn't making the future better for all of us,
Yeah.
the rest of society would fall in line, and we would have a different relationship with this unbelievably positive potential that's in.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of people who think the same way. What you just mentioned, that we just need to bring these people together, or get some content out so they can endorse that content, right? So, but there's a lot of people probably thinking the same way. You and I talking about that. Hey, listen, there has to be positive content. We need to share those good stories out there. But they've been outnumbered in social media.
But stranger things have happened. Remember the ALS water ice bucket challenge?
Yeah.
That arguably almost everybody in the world had some engagement with.
Yeah.
That started with 4 people in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That is an amazing story we did on the website, like how that actually happened, or how things like the Underground Railroad during the Civil War happened, or just anything you want to name that's good and impactfully changed society's mentality about something. Started with 3 or 4 people around a kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that. We can sit at our dinner table and say, I saw. So, the most extraordinary documentary, and then there's this book. So, Happiness is an Option. You asked me about the book. Is full of my story, and I would argue that it's a unusual story in that it's probably pretty common to most people. I come from a little farming town in Illinois. My husband and I were childhood sweethearts in this place that was just so flat for hundreds of miles, and we would have never known anything about the world except for my husband was one of the top 20 basketball players in the world. Graduated from high school, played against Michael Jordan, everybody. And that was sort of our ticket out. Not that we needed to get out of that place. It's an amazing place. Okay. But it was our ticket to a world that just expanded what we thought was possible. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tell people is important about their business relationships to their online lives, and for that matter, the way they work in their personal lives as well, is that we need to get an expanded perspective about what's possible. And when you see signs of goodness and progress and you're careful about your sources, so that's in the book, The Happiness Option. I teach that happiness is an option. I teach people how to quickly and easily recognize whether the source of what they're seeing or reading or what have you on the internet is trustworthy. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
There's always mistakes that people who are trying to sell us something or abuse our goodwill or have an agenda. There's all these really simple mistakes. Pretty easy. But the happiness is an option. Teaches folks how to recognize those things, and Jenny, just it's a new way to reimagine the way the internet functions in your life. It's like a tool. That's all the internet should be.
Yeah.
And like
Definitely.
a hammer, it can either be used to build things or demolish things. It's our choice.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you look at that from that angle, yeah, definitely, it's a tool to do, run a business or to do whatever we're gonna do, right? And it's simply just a tool.
Yes.
So very interesting. So business leader who are listening, who are watching our content, they definitely got a lot of responsibilities. They, what we're coming out of for the last couple of years, they got to build the companies, they got to get on a growth, and they also, what we're talking about is they need to keep a goodness in the mind and a gratitude economy. Any tips you can share for them, with them, that what are some of the items they need to consider when they're building this a new economy, or they're going back into businesses to get better, get back to where they were before a couple of years before.
Yeah, so the way into the gratitude economy is to look at your own life and see what attracts, what makes you feel great. For instance, most of us have a hairdresser or a barber we'll drive all the way across town for.
Yeah.
Most of us have, that restaurant that knows the drink. And we sit down, there comes my perfect martini, on Thursday nights. Most of us have somebody, a dry cleaner, that will say, Dr. Lynda, I'm sorry about that dress you got that terrible stain on that you borrowed from your sister. You might as well just give her $300 because I'm never getting it. The trusted advisors in our life, they're out there, and no matter your business model, you can become a trusted advisor for people. And so just look at your own life, what you're giving your attention to, who you're spending your money with, and have your team, no matter the size, start looking at this fact that I think we're all looking for businesses that make us feel lucky and safe about the future. If you start creating a business model for your employees, they start talking about it out in the world. Goodness can be viral too.
Yeah.
And I'd say I consult with people about this, because part of the problem is that we look at our organizations with rose-colored glasses. We say one thing, do another. We're not training middle managers with real leadership skills. That one of the people that I interviewed point blank said that a lot of people are leaving companies not because they don't like the company, not because they don't like the work, but they've got middle managers that have no inspirational leadership skills. I mean, we're going to have to invest. Businesses are going to have to invest. I've made it a practice of reading almost just probably 10 New York Times bestseller list business books a year for 30 years, 5 to 10. And I teach it to my dental practice. My team at the dental practice has studied all of the greats, the Black Swan, good to great, you name it.
Nice.
Adam, I could go on and on. I don't want to name names, but I mean, I consciously did that in a dental practice with 17 employees. But we have a fabulous business model because of it. So I think leaders are going to have to invest in a reality check about what they're doing and what they're inspiring in the people right below them, and what they inspire and recognize the pyramid effect can be used for so much good.
Very interesting. So where you see a goodness exchange or Europe journey for next couple of years, Dr. Lynda, where your goals, where are you trying to take this goodness exchange? What do you hope for short future?
Well, at the Goodness Exchange, we have social media. I would like to create a social media platform, and we have it at the Goodness Exchange, where people can be certain that they will bump into and be multipliers for the good intention and good ideas of others. I think we've got to have somebody step up. I heard somebody on Clubhouse the other day, a newscaster that I used to really like, going on about how he had everybody all riled up on the Clubhouse meeting he was at the night before. And did that like it was a badge of courage or honor. And that's it. My attention does not go to people who think it's a badge of courage or honor to get everybody whipped up. We are looking, all of us, after this pandemic, and we are looking for the thoughtful, measured, help choices. So I have created the Goodness Exchange. We want to create a huge social media platform there where people's sense of well-being and peace of mind and excitement is protected. With the podcast at the Goodness Exchange, it's called the Conspiracy of Goodness Podcast.
Okay.
My husband and I are hoping to retire from dentistry soon, and we want to take this thing on the road. He and I are like fearless. I could live in a car. I'm one of those women. I just don't care about stuff. And we want to head to Eastern Europe and start broadcasting the podcast from places all over where people are doing good in the world and share ourselves. We're going to start in Poland. So Poland has accepted, I think, 2.9 million people from Ukraine. And I've got some connections in Poland. So the podcast is going to go on the road, and I'm going to travel the world with my husband, and we're going to interview the coolest in place and try and convey that sense of pride in place all over the world. And the articles version, the article part of the podcast is going to be there. I mean, the article version of the Goodness Exchange is going to be developed into a way that people can find their in the goodness that's happening in the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I lived for a long time in my life with a nagging feeling that I was uniquely built to contribute something, but it wasn't dentistry. Well, I'm sorry to say that, but because I was arguably at the top of my field, but I knew there was something else. And so I hope the Goodness Exchange will expand into a place that not only shines a light on all the greatness in the world, but helps people find their role in.
Very interesting. You know, I recently last week I had Mark Davis from Ukraine. He runs orphanages there. He does a great work. I will recommend. It's gonna be air next week, so I'll send you a link to that. You know, maybe you want to talk to him. He tells totally different story than what we hear from media, but he's been running orphanages in Ukraine for last 6-7 years, and he needs help. So we had a great discussion. I learned so much from him. It's gonna be air. I think next week should be his podcast. I'll send you a link to that as well.
Absolutely do that. I got goosebumps when you mentioned it. That's a good sign.
Yeah, no, he came to US only for a couple of days just to deal with some financial side of things, but he'll be back in Ukraine. So he does a great work there. You know, he's helping a lot of kids there. During this war. So definitely people like him, you know, they make a big difference in society, and your contribution is a huge. And what are you doing? I definitely recommend business leader who are watching. You know, if you have a good story to share, reach out to you. Or get a copy of your book as well, and reach out to you for discussion. I'm gonna include links to your book and your website right below this video as well.
So I welcome. That's how we're building this. We're building this. People, person by person. We can change the future, but we can only do it if we're not little separate independent points of light. We got to come together because the darkness is just too heavy. It's just pushing us all apart.
Well, look how we connected, right? So it just on the internet, you know, I send you email, we connected. So that's how we get to connect with those people who are trying to do good work out there, right? Definitely, I will recommend book. I'll put a link below the video. Any message you want to share, before we go with the audience?
Well, I think I want to tell the story of the Conspiracy of Goodness. You've heard him mention it a few times.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing a wonderful man in New Jersey who has this incredible project with kids in schools and being better citizens and stuff. And he heard what we were doing, and he said, "Oh, Dr. Lynda, that sounds like the Conspiracy of Goodness story. You know that story, don't you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, there was a wonderful little small French village called Le Chambon that managed to save 1,000 Jews from a nearby concentration camp for about 2 years during World War II. And apparently there was this rabbi who was giving a talk about that chapter in history. And he tells this great story where giving the talk, he called the talk The Conspiracy of. So in 1986, he was giving the talk in Belgium, and at the end of the talk, an old man stood up in the back of the room to say he'd been one of the Dutch rescue. And the old man asked, I think I could have saved a whole entire family without the active participation of the mailman, the milkman, and the neighbors. No, the old man said, for every one person saved, 7 rescued. It was, he said, a conspiracy of goodness.
Wow.
This is who we are. That's the last thought I want to leave with you. We are not what we see on the news or social media. We are doers, we are givers, we are helpers. We have been for now, they think, literally, scientifically, about 44,000 years. The advent of the internet does not change that.
Okay.
It is just the overwhelming thing out there that's attracting our attention. So I want people to realize that there is goodness and progress in the world, and overwhelmingly more of it than we would ever know. You got to seek it, and you got to engage it, and multiply.
Very interesting. Great story. Very interesting. Yeah, I want to appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending time. I learned so much, and I wish, I hope people will, definitely reach out to you for conversation. If you had a goodness story, just share with you and connect with you, and get a copy of your book.
Great.
Makes a huge...
I am just all about sharing this message of this alternate narrative, and I'm happy to speak for anybody who'll listen.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Lynda.
Okay, have a great day.
Bye-bye. Hi there. Thank you so much for investing time with us and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. For next episode, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and send your feedback. Until next time, have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.